Hey there, welcome to another wiki video, the series where... Oh wait, no, this is my random facts series. And well, the idea is basically the same either way. To start off, Examinee623 told me a funny little fact about Fox's rapid jab animation. Normally, for the final hit of Fox's rapid jab, his foot goes upwards diagonally, which not only looks, natural, but also lines up just fine with the effects of the attack. And this is true for either direction you face. However, when you use the attack by the ledge, you notice that Fox's leg gets broken and faces downwards away from the attack effect. More specifically, his foot gets broken. Again, this happens regardless of which side you're facing. A great way to see this difference is if you position yourself by the ledge at just the right distance. For some of the attack, you won't be over the ledge, so the leg will look nice and fine, until suddenly the gravity of the offstage just shatters Fox's ankles, until he brings it back onto stage and it heals. Using the good old turn on invincibility visualizer and use a superstar trick, we can see how Fox's hurtbox changes too. For both the normal and ledge variant, the green, which indicates Fox's hurtbox, is properly on his leg. And since his leg is lower than it normally is, this means his hurtbox is too. And as for the hitbox of the attack itself, apparently that's rigged onto the knee bone, which you can see here, which is again attached to his leg, meaning since the leg is a bit lower than usual, that would imply that the attack itself also goes a little bit lower. I'm still not entirely sure why this happens. It's kind of a unique circumstance that I didn't notice with other rapid jabs, but that's pretty neat. Next, Wade asks what happens to a counter and whatnot when used as Shadow freezes the player. I found this one kind of interesting since, for Shadow's freeze frame, attack moves like Marth's Nair, or items like the Fire Flower, lose their hitbox. But things like shielding actually do continue to work, as does parrying, so I could see counters going either way. And as it turns out, counters do still work. Hitting a frozen counter will trigger it, though of course it won't actually attack until unfrozen. After the counter is triggered, the opponent will remain intangible though, which makes sense since a counter normally has intangibility frames after its activation anyways. So that's that, though I did think of a few things after seeing this. For one, yes, that does mean you can counter the counter, since the extra time you get actually lets you set that up. So if someone tries to counter while frozen, that can be a strategy, I suppose. Though it doesn't always work. If the move is strong enough, like with the home run bat, then I guess the hit lag is longer, meaning Marth experiences intangibility for longer and your own counter won't hit. Which I guess adds some niche onto this. Niche. And otherwise, I was just curious about what other characters did. For Game & Watch, his bucket will still be active while frozen. This includes both the reflective properties as well as the absorption properties, which will properly absorb up to 3 levels as usual. And speaking of absorption, PSI Magnet also works just fine, which interestingly has its animation go back to normal speeds once Ness himself gets frozen, even though the effects were slowed down before. Next, using Pocket does indeed work, similar to the counter. It'll pocket whatever first hits it just fine, which makes this a particularly good strategy since you're also left intangible when using Pocket, even if you don't absorb anything. And as for other counters, Incineroar's counter does get pulled off and he does get Rage accordingly, as normal. For Shulk, again the counter does get pulled off, but interestingly, you'll also get slowed down after triggering it. And the slowdown lasts as long as it normally would have, despite the fact that the counter itself can't actually start until Shulk is unfrozen. And once he does finally get unfrozen, there's no extra slowdown. And for Sora's counter, triggering it will show off the effect that normally plays when it gets triggered, but not only do you not get stunned like normal, but Sora just doesn't follow up with the counter afterwards, making this a bit more of a unique case. Also, yeah, that prompt was taken from my old fax submission form. It's been a while since I last said it, and I've gotten questions since, so I'll reiterate that that form system is gone, and probably not returning ever. Not only because I'm branching out more towards the wiki series and other types of things like that, but also just because I have a lot of backlog as it is, and I don't think I need more. So if you want to submit something to me, honestly the best way to do that is to make a tweet tagging me, preferably having a video or photo accompaniment in that tweet. And DMing me on there can also work, though it's easier to go unnoticed. Of course, YouTube comments work too, but since I try to limit how much I read them for the very basic mental health reasons I'm sure you've heard of before from other YouTubers, it can also go unseen. I mean, I do read the top comments, but you know. Next, Examinee623 brings up a fun fact regarding the barrel's destruction animation. That being, the destruction animation of a barrel shows a lot of planks of wood with a really large smash ball symbol on it. despite the fact that the smash ball symbol on the barrel is actually tiny. But it is big on the crate. Yeah, basically they just reuse the destruction animation of the crate for the barrel, even though there are subtle differences between the two. Never noticed it before, but it's a funny little detail. Speaking of funny little details, Bot29996700 on Twitter made a post showing off a cool Easter egg regarding the Guile assist trophy. Normally Guile only really does two moves, Sonic Boom if the opponent is far away, and Flash Kick if they're in range. But what if I told you there's a small chance that Guile will misinput that Flash Kick? Well, we can actually see him do that right here. You see him jump into the air and use what looks like a neutral air, right? Yeah, we believe that to be a misinput. I'll start with the explanation of why they'd even implement that. As in, I'll echo the explanation I was told, as I am not familiar with these types of games. Basically, the input for Flash Kick comes from holding the downward direction for long enough, and then pressing up in whatever your desired kick is. In this case, it would be a heavy kick. You can relate this charge mechanic to Terry's rising tackle, where you have to hold downwards before you can get it to work. Perhaps this is why Guile is always crouching. However, this misinput move could very easily happen if you mess up those Flash Kick inputs, and it's called a jump roundhouse, or a jump heavy kick. I guess the two terms are interchangeable. I'll stick with heavy kick for here. I'll keep using Terry as the visualizer, so pretend that rising tackle is meant to be Flash Kick, and doing a jumping up air indicates a misinput, and thus is the jump heavy kick. If you failed to charge long enough, that is, you didn't hold downwards long enough, then you'll just end up inputting a jump and an attack, which is what the jump heavy kick is. And if you charge long enough but take too long to input the kick after the upward input, it'll again just end up becoming a jump command followed by a kick. Now, Terry's rising tackle is more lenient overall, but it still gives off the same idea. Those were the layman's terms in which I interpreted it. Explained for all you fellow non-FGC folk out there. You can pretty clearly see how much overlap the inputs do, and thus how easy it would be to make a mistake that leads to using the jump heavy kick. I do not have any personal experience with these types of games, so I apologize if anything may be slightly off. But regardless, this is insanely interesting to me alone. The fact that they would even bother putting in a misinput for one of Guile's two moves, and for an assist trophy at that. As far as I know, there isn't a misinput for Sonic Boom, but yeah. As for more gameplay specific things, I can't really give you exact numbers for how often it happened because it was pretty inconsistent overall. As you can see here, I'm using a spirit set with super armor, just to kind of make everything easier, as well as turning on fixed damage. And in this environment, when I was jumping around randomly, close to Guile-ish, I'd say I got that misinput like 2% of the time, maybe 1%. I'll stick to 2%. So every 50 or so flash kicks, I got a jump heavy kick. Again, those are just rough numbers to give you an idea. But when I just idled and let Guile go to town, I didn't get the misinput to happen a single time, despite seeing hundreds of flash kicks. Now, the exact distance between Guile and DK for when he did the misinput was inconsistent, as was of course its frequency in general, so I don't think it's solely a matter of positioning. That is, I still think there's a chance coming into play, as you know, it is supposed to be a misinput. But I definitely don't think it's just chance either, as if that was the case, I'd see the misinput equally between having DK jump around and having him stay idle. And yet I never got it to happen while he was idle, so it's just hard for me to say. It's also possible that it only happens when Guile uses many flash kicks in a row, which would line up with the logic behind the misinput that we mentioned before. You know, maybe he just didn't get to charge long enough, I guess. And perhaps DK jumping around triggers that idea better, but that's just speculation. And I also decided to test how much damage it did. And here it dealt a whopping 8.1%, and here it dealt 10.1%, which I guess would be the sweet spot of it. Of course, I'm still using the spirit set here, and I think it'll be incredibly difficult for me to get hit by this misinput any other way, so we can just sort of reverse engineer the damage changes, and the jump heavy kick ends up doing around 15% for the weaker hit and around 18% for the stronger one, with no spirits, give or take a little bit. So yeah, I think that's absolutely hysterical and absolutely interesting. It really makes you wonder who is controlling Guile. Is it the Duck Hunt guy? Huh. Next, ExamineE623 brings up something funny about Yoshi's Island. Normally when you go up the slope on the right of the stage, you'll see in the off-screen magnifying glass that the character is still above the ground and on the slope just fine. However, the background in this visualizer isn't actually accurate. If you go into the camera and start heading towards the blast zone, you'll see that the character starts going into the ground. It's a pretty small area since eventually you'll just reach the blast zone, but it's pretty easy to see. It's not like the ground layer and the visual layer of the slope were totally off to begin with, At least I don't think so. Rather, it feels like it all matches up just nicely, but once you start getting off screen, the ground layer just sort of stops going up. Which is actually pretty weird for me to think about. Like, I would have thought I'd noticed this through gameplay alone, but I definitely didn't. We can also see the effects of items, like the bumper here, which becomes invisible in the camera, but it's still properly placed. And the same with the pitfall and all that. It's crazy what kind of new things you'll see with the in-game camera. Next, sticking with Examinie623, he gives some really interesting trivia regarding Pac-Man's trampoline. Basically, when a character gets put into freefall when landing on Pac-Man's red trampoline, the entire cast actually experiences the same amount of landing lag, that being 29 frames. Now, I'll be honest with y'all, I did not do this with the entire cast, but I did try out with a pretty large variety of characters and this remained true. Which in and of itself is pretty interesting considering how different the landing lag is for each character's normal freefall animations. Or rather, I guess it would be tied to the move that causes them to normally go into freefall. Take the 36 frames of landing lag usually found on Bowser's Up Special, and the 24 frames of landing lag after Pichu's, and so on. So it's interesting, but it makes sense, as I guess the action of hitting a red trampoline could be considered a move, thus everyone is given the same landing lag from it. However, what makes this truly stupid is that there's one exception to this, that being Mythra. She only experiences 18 frames of landing lag in this situation. And yes, I am specifying Mythra, because even Pyra experiences the usual 29 frames. So yeah, I guess Mythra is the best character at recovering from Pac-Man's trampoline. It's pretty nuts, so you can check that off in your Smash Fact bingo card. If anyone has any guesses as to why that's even the case, feel free to voice them in the comments. And no, I don't think it's just because Mythra is a switchable character, as all of the Pokemon from Pokemon Trainer have the normal 29 frames of landing lag too. Oh, and also there's technically one other exception, that being the Pac-Man who owns the trampoline. When he gets put into free fall from it, he experiences 30 frames of landing lag, instead of 29. But this isn't universal like the other cases. That is, if Pac-Man gets put into free fall from a different Pac-Man's trampoline, then the landing lag is 29 frames, just like almost everyone else. And if Pac-Man lands after using his own trampoline, and then gets back on it after it turns red again, then he has 29 frames of landing lag rather than 30. So I guess that 30 number comes from a more unique place as it is his own recovery move. And going from grounded to red trampoline on its own is considered a separate move or something. And lastly for today's video, guys, you'll never believe who this submission is from. Examinie623 made a post about a goofy visual glitch with Ivysaur's Vine Whip. Basically, if you use Vine Whip while the game is slowed down, you'll see it vibrate pretty violently. But this is a bit different from other glitches that come from slowdowns. The move doesn't always get glitched out like this, so long as you don't input a direction when using it. It's inputting the more diagonal variant of the Vine Whip that causes this to happen. And yes, this happens on all of these slowed speeds. It doesn't happen quite the same way when slowed down by the timer, though even this version is different from what the angled Vine Whip normally looks like, so yeah. Man, slowing the game down brings up a lot of goofy glitches on this channel, huh? I could even make a whole dedicated video gathering them up. I mean, I'm not gonna, but you know. And with that, I'm gonna end the video there. So, with summer coming to a close, I hope everyone had a good one. I mean, I know it's not over quite yet, but with school starting and all these stores putting out autumn-themed crap, it's basically gone. Oh, and I'm finishing the script only hours after the Nintendo Direct happened. I mean, at this point I've accepted that I'm just not really a hardcore gamer. That's why I've decided not to stream or make reaction videos for these types of things anymore. I just don't have it in me, I don't have anything unique to say, really. But, yeah, I guess for my main thoughts on the Direct, I think Ib is pretty cool. I was happy to see that. I think that Kirby remake looks pretty cool. I was also happy to see that. We got like 4 farming sims, so I'm very happy for farming sim stands. I'm very, very happy for Arlo. And I'm very, very, very happy for me, because we finally got a title for the new Zelda game, and I can stop calling it Breath of the Wild 2. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. You know, it's actually pretty bad timing for this title. I can see why they didn't live stream the Direct in the UK now. But I'm sorry, but I'm definitely not the first person to make that observation. Anyhow, yeah, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a massive thanks to Parade Dino, Raighne, Skully, Sylvian700, Burbo, SickanDaDank, and everyone else for their support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.